This meeting is called to order in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. This meeting was included in a list of meeting dates sent to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Highland Park Planet on January 3rd, 2018, and was posted on the bulletin board of Borough Hall, 221 South Fifth Avenue on January 3rd, 2018, and has remained continuously posted as required by law. Fire exits are to my left and to my right. If you come up to speak, please speak into the microphones, and assistive listening devices are available. Gabriella, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Yeah.
Why is that?
No, you're in the front row. I always pick somebody in the front row.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mayor Brill-Mittler?
Here.
Councilman Fine?
Here.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin?
Here.
Councilman George?
Here.
Councilwoman Kim Chohan?
Here.
Councilwoman Welkowitz?
Here.
Borough Attorney?
Here.
Borough Administrator?
Here.
Okay, tonight we are honoring some of our residents. First of all, is anyone from the library here or any of Susan Roth's family? Please come forward. I'll come to you. Josh, do you want to join me? This year, Highland Park lost a very, very valuable resident. Susan Roth had been a member of the library working there and also on the board for many years. She was a face that always greeted us when we got there. And the library is a very important part of our town. So Susan was an important part of our town too. And in her memory, we would like to give her first a certificate of appreciation for all her years of volunteerism. And now I have a resolution that I'd like to read in her memory. Whereas Susan Roth, longtime resident, public servant, and friend of Highland Park, departed this life on May 13th, 2018, and whereas Susan served as the children's librarian for the Highland Park Library from August 1975 until March 1983. She then served as director of the Highland Park Public Library from April 1983 and December 1987. And whereas Susan served on the Library Board of Trustees from May 1993 until her passing. Whereas Susan, during her tenure on the Library Board of Trustees, served as the Library Board President for 5 years. She also served as Vice President, Secretary, and was a member of the Personnel, Capital Campaign, and Strategic Planning Committee. And whereas Susan was instrumental in getting the 1990 library referendum passed that authorized the funding for the expansion and renovation of the current library building during the 1990s, her efforts helped the capital fundraising campaign exceed its goal. And whereas Susan most recently served on the newly formed committee that successfully received support from the Mayor and Borough Council to renovate the current library building. And whereas Susan was a devoted mom to her children, Leslie and Brandon, and a devoted grandmother to her grandchildren. And whereas Susan, for nearly 40 years, gave her energy, talents, and devotion to the Highland Park Public Library to make it the heart of the Highland Park community. And whereas Susan will be sorely missed by her family, friends, and the community at large. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Mayor and Council of the Borough of Highland Park, County of Middlesex, State of New Jersey, do hereby express deep sorrow and regret at the passing of Susan Roth, and do hereby extend heartfelt condolences to her family and friends. And be it further resolved that this resolution be spread upon the official minutes of this meeting, and that an embossed hard copy hereof be delivered to the bereaved family of Susan Roth, along with the governing body's deepest sympathy. Thank you for sharing her with us.
I'd just like to say thank you on behalf of my mom. I know the library meant the world to her, and she spent a lot of her life dedicated to it, and Brandon and I certainly spent a lot of our life visiting her there and reading books, and I think it sparked our love of literature, and we've done the same for our children. So thank you very much for recognizing her. We appreciate it.
Thank you. She said it all.
Thank you. Thank you again. Is Frances McDonald here tonight, or any of her family? Well, I just want to let you know that I shared this proclamation with Frances on her very special birthday, right after she announced her retirement, and the fact that she was going to be moving back home to her home down in the South. I was honored to be able to give her a proclamation for all her service to all of the community for so many years, and we will share this again with her. I have another proclamation to read. We are noting and honoring Honor Guards Day here in Highland Park. Whereas honor guards and their families and communities face an increasingly difficult role as they protect and serve the nation and public, and whereas Honor Guards of America consist of former and retired military, police, firefighters, EMS, chiefs, and other agencies, and whereas in 2016, 16 military, 140 law enforcement officers, 68 firefighters, 15 EMS, and 7 chiefs across the nation lost their lives in the line of duty, which represents the highest number in years. And whereas the men and women who wear these uniforms understand the dangers of their job, but they heed the call to serve and willingly face those risks every day in order to create a safe nation and communities for all Americans. And whereas honor guards honor the sacrifices made by those who wear the uniforms, planning the service for our fallen, marching and presenting the colors with honor, standing watch over our fallen in all weather and comforting those in duress. And whereas the Borough of Highland Park recognizes and appreciates the sacrifices of honor guards and their families and supports their efforts to keep New Jersey a safe place to work, live, and visit. And now, therefore, I, Gail Brill-Mittler, Mayor of the Borough of Highland Park, on behalf of the Highland Park Borough Council and residents of Highland Park, do hereby proclaim July Honor Guard Month and urge all the citizens of Highland Park to take recognition of this event and participate fittingly in its observance. Thank you. All right, council reports. I'm going to start today on my left, Councilwoman Foster Dublin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to start off tonight by yielding some of my time. And we have a number of issues that is going to be discussed tonight. But the first one I would like to discuss is the report that we're commissioning DeLacy Davis Consultant to do for us. And that's on the profiling and the number of stops that was done in Highland Park. And I would like to ask Mr. Davis to come down and just to share a little bit about himself, his expertise. I think it would be best from the mic with us, and generally the kind of service that you'll be providing.
Sure. Good evening.
Thank you.
Good evening. So I'm a retired sergeant, 20 years, East Orange, New Jersey. Currently working with a consulting company, but with a team. I'm also an academician completing doctoral research at St. John Fisher College. Essentially what we've done is looked at profiling, looked at explicit, implicit bias, and those kinds of things, as well as racial profiling over the last 15, 20 years around the state and in parts of the country, as well as worked with other governments around some of the law enforcement issues. And essentially what we've looked at here in terms of in the meetings that we've had is the possibility of looking at the historical data or the archival data as presented by the chief and looking at it in the context of perhaps based upon how it's captured in the community, traffic stops, street stops, is there disproportionality in terms of who gets stopped in the community versus others, and how is that impacting the policing, and whether or not we can use the academics, and in this instance the report, to inform police practice. So in our conversation with the police chief, he's been very open, and the dialogue has been very candid in terms of transparency and this being a community policing environment. So essentially we're looking at it from the perspective, me being positioned, having retired from law enforcement, and some of my team who are PhDs and EDDs who come out of law enforcement at the federal level, the local level, but more importantly, also advocating in the communities on behalf of communities. So we're looking at it very purely, and the data are what they are, in that it's archival data, and we would look at it based upon how it's been captured over a time period, and then use what's called a veil of darkness approach. What that means is that there's got to be controlling for the residents, but also people who travel through the community who aren't residents, to see if in fact there is a disproportionality. And so we would look at it over a time period, hypothetically between 5:30 at night, 5:30 in the evening and 9:30 at night, over a period of years, which would then control, because there's daylight savings time. So sometimes there's a daytime at 5:30, and other times it's darker. But that would control for the idea that some would say, well, the police can look into a vehicle and see the race or the ethnicity of the person being stopped. So that would control for some of that, and then we would report the data, do the analysis, do the interpretation, and then make some recommendations based upon the findings.
And I would just like to add that Mr. DeLacy Davis came to us as a recommendation from the NAACP in the area, and the Public Safety Committee has done quite a bit of research on you, and he has come to meet with us and talk with us at least 4 or 5 times already, and we are looking forward to his proposal and moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to
So-
to someone else because I have a much longer report.
So do you want us to come back to you for that?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
1 second. I just want to thank you so much for coming out tonight again and making the presentation, and thank you for your efforts, and looking forward to working with you.
Okay, Councilman Fine.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've served on the Borough Council since January 2015, and it is true that the Borough Council doesn't have immediate solutions to offer to solve certain local issues. As a result, I know that there are some residents that may feel that we are not focusing enough on these issues. However, the council does continually work on and is committed to addressing local issues such as tax stabilization, downtown development, infrastructure, and quality of life, even if the solutions to the issues take time to achieve. With that said, I think it is important for the council to be vocal not only on local issues, but state and national issues too. So while we are still exploring the possibility of setting up a charitable fund for Highland Park residents to pay their property taxes to help deal with the new federal tax law, I will state that I'm glad that the state budget that Governor Murphy signed on July 2nd provides for an increase in the state property tax deduction cap from $10,000 to $15,000. And also, even though there is a court order for the Trump administration to reunite children 5 and under, although that has since been extended, that were separated from their parents at the U.S.-Mexico border by today, and to reunite all other separated children within 30 days of the court order, I still think that it's appropriate for this council to consider a resolution to reunite children and parents separated by the United States authorities under the Trump administration's zero tolerance policy on tonight's agenda. The proposed resolution urges that the Trump administration develop a plan to reunite the families torn apart by the zero tolerance policy immediately. It urges the Attorney General to commit to cease and desist directing federal authorities to separate children from their parents under a zero tolerance policy. It urges the United States Congress to pass a bill appropriating funds to ensure that the requisite efforts are made to reunite the children that federal authorities separated from their parents at the U.S.-Mexico border from April 6, 2018 and through June 20th, 2018. And finally, it urges the United States Congress to pass the Compassionate Calling and Immigrant Family Reunification Act of 2018. I encourage my colleagues to adopt this resolution tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilwoman Kim Chohan?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Summer camps are off to an awesome start with trips galore and fun in the sun for our youth. Summer basketball begins tonight, and fall soccer registration is currently open. Visit our Senior Youth Center for more details. And just a reminder, if your children receive free or reduced lunch from our Highland Park School District, you qualify for a special summer camp pricing. Please reach out directly to myself or the Recreation Department for assistance if needed. You can also find this information on our Borough website under the Recreation Department tab. I hope you all enjoy the Independence Day fireworks. This annual event would not be possible without our sponsors, Raceway Gas, Mason, Griffin, and Pearson, AA Discount Affordable Car Rental, International Association of Heat and Frost Installators, Workers, Local 32. The Historic Commission is working on setting up the display case in Borough Hall and would like to move their collection into Borough Hall ASAP. So we're working on a schedule to start moving our collection from Main Street to here so that it can be organized and the public and our residents can come and look at the items at your own during borough hours. Also, they are finalizing a list of of street names based on importance of Highland Park residents. So, senior services this afternoon, the seniors and the seniors and community enjoyed a bluegrass jam and ice cream social event at the senior center. We have some great senior trips scheduled this month. Tomorrow, the seniors will be going to Crystal Springs Water Park in East Brunswick to enjoy a nice day of fun, sunshine, and water. And on Thursday, July 12th, over 50 residents will be boarding the Cornucopia Princess for an afternoon cruise around the Hudson. Please stop by our senior center and check out our borough website and Facebook pages for upcoming trips. On Monday, July 16th, there will be a free healthy cooking workshop held at 12 noon at the Senior Center. Please call the office to register. And Tuesday, July 17th at 10 a.m., we will be hosting a Taekwondo presentation open to all residents. Please join us for light refreshments and a demonstration from our special guests. And just keep an eye out on for all of our summer and fall activities. Although this area of mine is kind of senior services, it is open to a lot of program, and bus trips are open to all residents. And utilize and make sure you check up on our seniors during this extreme heat. The Senior Youth Center is an official cooling center, so please utilize it if needed. And something I learned this summer is to drink water even when you're not thirsty. And everyone have a wonderful summer. And that's my report, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilwoman Welkowitz?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to again thank the Mayor for hosting Highland Park's Volunteer Appreciation event last month, where a volunteer from each of our volunteer committees is honored. Additionally, the Special Volunteer of the Year was awarded to our Safe Walking and Cycling Committee Vice Chair, Sean Meehan. Sean has volunteered at several events to let the public know what our committee is about. He's worked on all of our major projects, including our school travel study, which was the basis for a large Safe Routes to School grant, which we were awarded. He helped organize the state's first bicycle assessment here in town with transportation coordinators from counties around the state, and this became the foundation for our application to join the New Jersey Department of Transportation Technical Assistance Program. Aside from getting us all this funding and resources, he also helped paint the pop-up bike lane on Walter Street on Earth Day. Thanks to Sean for his commitment to Highland Park and its residents. And speaking of the Technical Assistance Program, which is, we've been awarded to join that program to improve safe walking and cycling in the borough. We held our kickoff meeting with our consultants, WPS, which is the consultants that we have been generously provided to us from the New Jersey Department of Transportation. Last month was the kickoff meeting, and we began to review the scope of work. They have also created a survey, and we very much would like as many people to contribute their thoughts and ideas. I'm going to list, I'll tell you what the links are, and then maybe Gary will have it on the video, and it's posted as well. Please take the survey at surveymonkey.com/r/hparkcs, and please draw on the interactive map at tinyurl.com/hparkbikeped. And if you have any questions, please email us at hpswacc@gmail.com.
Councilwoman, is that also on Facebook, so if people don't write it down tonight?
Yes, we'll make sure it's out.
Great.
There's always something happening in town. I would like to thank Siobhan Weinstein and the staff and volunteers at Highland Park's Main Street for hosting a lovely event last month, bringing business owners, borough employees, and Main Street staff and volunteers together for an after-work mixer at Pino's. Thanks to everyone who helped organize another Central Jersey pop-up flea market, another successful event of taking advantage of temporary space and bringing a unique shopping experience to our town, which attracts not only residents, but out-of-towners that then frequent our other shops and restaurants. Fridays, we have our farmers market from 11 a.m. to 5:30, and it's been voted one of the best farmers markets in the state. Main Street Music on the Corners is every Friday night in the summer from 7 to 10 p.m. Thanks to Brian Onken, who runs the HP Outdoor Movie Theater. Kid-friendly cartoons begin at dusk, about 45 minutes before the main feature, which begins at 9 p.m. Coming up July 21, a favorite, E.T. August 4th is House Party. August 18 is Isle of Dogs. And September 1 is Castle in the Sky. Highland Park After Dark begins this Thursday and every Thursday throughout July and August. Participating businesses will be open after work and offering special promotions and discounts to shoppers between 5 and 9 p.m. If you are a business who would like to participate, please contact mainstreethighlandpark@gmail.com. And lastly, if you are an artist, artisan, vendor, or local business, we want you to sign up to be part of Highland Park's annual Arts Street Festival. This will be our 13th annual Arts in the Park. It's a juried art show, a real juried art show, and arts and crafts sale, and it's in downtown on September 16th. Please check mainstreet.org/artsinthepark for more details. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Foster Dublin, would you like to take past Councilman Hirsch's?
Yes, I would. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, because I would like to address, put in place what's happened, what's happening, what's next as it pertains to the burning question that many of you are here for, and that has to do with the volunteer first aid squad. And I'll start by just going over what we've put together. The overall Highland Park Volunteer First Aid Squad has provided decades of exemplary responder basic life support service to the borough. Augmented since 1982 by Robert Wood Johnson Mutual Aid for Advanced Life Support, which we call ALS, as well as the BLS support from the Highland Park First Aid Squad. In recent years, expectations around the public health and first response has become more complicated, regulations more demanding, medical practice more complex, medical terminology more expensive. Over the same period, economic and political pressures have escalated, and volunteerism and charitable giving have waned. In January 2018, the Borough of Highland Park Health Committee became more concerned about the rising volunteer squad, Highland Park First Aid Squad response time, and increased reliance by the volunteer first aid squad and the borough dispatch on an RWJ, Robert Wood Johnson Mutual Aid. By April of 2018, the alarming trend was firmly established, and the committee was obligated to establish a more stable and reliable first response option for the borough. In May of 2018, the Borough Council announced a new structure. All daytime BLS basic life support and ALS advanced life support calls would be dispatched by Robert Wood Johnson. All evening basic life support calls would be dispatched by the First Aid Squad. Robert Wood Johnson would continue to provide the advanced life support and backup for mutual aid where necessary, if this could not be filled by the First Aid Squad on the nighttime crew. At present, the borough is working with Robert Wood Johnson to negotiate an even more beneficial contractual relationship with RWJ informed by citizens and professional input, and analyze the existing contracts and by existing contract and experience for approximately a dozen or so towns that have worked with Robert Wood Johnson in a similar way. A little bit of history. In support for public health, the borough has a long history of 70 years plus of partnership with the all-volunteer First Aid Squad, whose compassionate and professional service has many families in Highland Park can attest to. Since 1982, the Borough of Highland Park has had a mutual aid agreement with Robert Wood Johnson Hospital, now RWJ-UH, and St. Barnabas Health, collectively termed RWJ in one note. Through a mutual aid, RWJ has continued on the step for basic life support for all. Advanced life support. Called into Highland Park, as well as basic life support for calls which the First Aid Squad and crew could not fill within the stated time frame. Historically, our First Aid Squad, Highland Park First Aid Squad, has provided their ambulance and first aid service for free to all 911 callers, covering covering the significant cost of providing such a service through a combined charitable donations as through funding, such as annual stipends, building and land allowances, ambulance, built-in workers' compensation insurance, and fuel that we have provided. Over the past decade, there has been a national fall in all both volunteer and charitable giving, in part attributed to the economic downturn of 2008. Over the same time period, the previous significant infrastructure and service of the First Aid Squad has begun to fail to keep pace with the demanding additional regulatory and technological expectations of modern public health and first-tier response organization, resulting in a slow erosion of a relatively accountable, reliable, and professional expertise and capable of expected service for the provider of the borough. The resulting stress on the relationships contributed into a turn down and deterioration of trust and respect with both parties. Beginning January 2018, Highland Park increasingly unable to fill the crew to support basic life support within the regulatory 10 minutes and 59 time frame. This caused the borough dispatcher to rely increasingly on mutual aid support from RWJ for basic life support services, in addition to RWJ usual advanced life support services. By April of 2018, the trend became more pronounced that the Borough Safety Committee deemed it necessary to implement formal changes, which has pursued through a series of private meetings with the First Aid Squad leadership, public meeting with concerned citizens, interviews with local hospital first responders, health providers, and in fact-finding visits to other towns which have weathered similar changes in past years. Currently, an affordable solution to this situation was formalized by the borough in May of 2018 as follows. In response to 911 calls, RWJ provide basic life support services during the hours of 6 a.m. in the morning to 8 p.m. in the evening. Highland Park First Aid Squad provide basic life support from 8 p.m. at night to 6 a.m. in the morning. Subject to availability of the crew to respond. RWJ will step in for basic life support if our Highland Park First Aid Squad is not available to fill a crew during that time. Advanced life support has been provided since 1982, and Robert Wood Johnson will continue to provide advanced life support when needed. Various adjustments to this plan has been proposed and are under consideration during this period, in which legal contracts with RWJ is also under preparation. As we look ahead through the above described interim plan, the primary goal is to re-establish an accountable, reliable, and professional public safety solution to 911 emergency response in Highland Park to 911 emergency response in Highland Park has been achieved. However, a number of citizens' concerns need to be addressed in formalizing a contractual relationship with RWJ, chief among cost. In contrast to the Highland Park First Aid Squad long-standing free basic life support service to the borough, RWJ has always billed for advanced life support and many mutual aid calls made when they were needed. through the borough citizens through their standard insurance Medicaid system. Now we are contractually formalizing the RWJ relationship. The borough has an opportunity to negotiate a more favorable term for its citizens. Chief among these desired terms is the possibility of a cap on the number of billing statements advance on any resident before a hardship waiver or associated chargeback benefit is implemented, and the possibility of eliminating balance billing. We are currently reviewing the first responders proposal from RWJ in comparison to RWJ contract with other New Jersey towns that they provide service for, to ensure the best possible result for Highland Park. As a part of a contractual relationship, RWJ has also provided significant additional value to the borough, including basic life support training for the staff, first aid, CPR, defibrillation, and Narcan for the first aid squad, Narcan and EpiPen certification, and community service support at the schools and at borough events. In addition to their fleet of 41 state-of-the-art ambulances, predictive positioning of crews and vehicles based on historical and in-the-moment data analysis, public health dispatch service, and related regulatory reporting systems. We hope to continue to work with the Highland Park First Aid Squad leadership to reestablish a trusting and respectful relationship through a more structured approach to the borough First Aid Squad partners. For example, a single point of contact for communication between the Borough of Highland Park and the First Aid Squad leadership, weekly documentation of schedule, on-call staff on site, sleepovers, ready to roll, staging for all evening/night basic life support crew, enhanced by Robert Wood Johnson first responder training, the transfer of significant levels of Highland Park First Aid Squad reporting obligations to RWJ, and etc. As always, the Borough of Highland Park will continue to provide opportunities for the Highland Park citizens to be aware of and influence the outcome of important decisions. Thank you.
Okay. Council President, do you have a report?
I do, Madam Mayor, thank you. There's a lot going on in the area of public works and our volunteers. I'll try and just hit the high spots. The Department of Public Works has begun work on the emerald ash borer problem by marking borough ash trees which are showing signs of distress and which have been identified by the Shade Tree Advisory Committee for removal. You'll know these trees, these are borough trees, not private trees. You'll see red tape wrapped around the trunk of these trees, and they've been identified as either being unhealthy or at the point of requiring removal. DPW is also working on the routes for the new second one-man trash removal truck, which we accepted delivery of, and we've also been doing the estimating for the purchase of the containers to be used for the route. The planning includes standardizing the units so that we don't have to stock different repair parts, cutting down costs. It will also include planning with the Safe Walking and Cycling Committee. There have been discussions to maintain the routes that are appropriate in order to not interfere with the future safe cycling and walking. The DPW, we started a project recently and had them assemble a list of all their current contracts for goods and services so that the borough can track dates for renewal and expiration. Also, once we get it up and running, more appropriate spreadsheets to track costs on payments on those contracts and when they become due. I'm hoping that the borough can develop a tracking model which we can use across all departments to have better real-time cost and effectiveness management. DPW having one of the larger budgets and some of the outside contracts for repair, many of them go through the state, but many of them don't.
With regard to the Environmental Commission, the meeting is tomorrow night at the Environmental Center, 7:30. The Environmental Commission last month met and discussed the new and better direction for the solar farm at the Lower Meadows. As you know, thanks to the Borough Administrator and the Mayor, PSE&G and the DEP, along with Assemblywoman Pinkin, who's now the liaison to the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Environmental Protection, which is New Jersey, re-inspected and reimagined the field and got it back to its original plan, removed all the conditions that the prior administration had placed in the way of virtually every green project in the state. We're hoping to have it actually up and running very shortly. The planning is in the stage right now. The Environmental Commission also discussed including provisions in our master plan review, which is due next year, but we're looking at items to include which have changed over the years, and they have changed significantly in both Highland Park and in the state, to include planning for electric vehicles and sustainability, along with Sustainable Highland Park. I recently attended a seminar for municipal planning for electric vehicles down in Hazlitt. There are a number of municipalities who have already done so, incorporating electric vehicles, or EVs as the EV nuts like to call them, into their municipal budget. And the project planning, some major projects, especially in Secaucus, did a presentation where they have moved a lot of their vehicles from the municipality into electric vehicles. So we'll be looking at that. The Meadows Trail volunteers are at work on the trails in the Lower Meadows. I see some of them in the audience today, and thank you for your work. They did a planning session recently in order to determine a new methodology of management. I was reviewing that today. It allows them to better keep up with the tasking and allocate volunteers. I look forward to working with them some more. Sustainable Highland Park closed out their plastic bag reduction program formally with a survey which to determine what the penetration into the municipality was over the year of the program. I'm glad to report that one of our most major plastic bag outlet user reduced plastic bag use from 1.3 million bags by over 200,000. It doesn't sound like much, but it was significant. Arising out of the program and the survey itself is a recommendation that the borough move forward immediately with some municipal regulation for the reduction in an ultimate disuse of plastic bags. As you know, recently there was a bill on the governor's desk which was conditionally vetoed, which would place a 5-cent per bag point of use, essentially meaning a 5% charge, which would go to the merchant to try and discourage it. That was conditionally vetoed. There are much better plans for that. And the question of whether we are preempted from adopting our own is still up in the air. Sustainable Highland Park has made the recommendation to move forward because we can't lose one way or another if we adopt it. And we will be working on that and presenting it over the next few months. The Shade Tree Advisory Committee, just to follow up one more thing, we'll be looking to designate the sustainability liaisons for each department so they can talk to each other. We are beginning to organize for certification for sustainability. As you know, there's now a gold classification. I'm no longer satisfied with the silver classification. We're going to go for the gold, and many of these programs will help us get there. The STAC has gotten its final draft of its 5-year plan, which is required for the state in order, subject to final fine-tuning. It is much more comprehensive than past years and includes a work plan for the ash tree removal, better management of the municipal street tree planting program. Everyone worked very hard on it, and it looks very good. And that will be posted as soon as it's finally adopted by STAC. STAC has reviewed and improved the tree replacement program as well. The tree replacement resolution authorizing the purchase is on tonight's agenda. And they modernized the request forms and central management so that the forms don't go lost as they have in the past. Someone requesting a tree And maybe years later, like in my case, one popped up on my front yard, and other times people requesting them, they don't get delivered, or they get installed where nobody requested them. It's now centrally managed. They put in a lot of work to manage that. Native plant preserve volunteers who work under the shade tree are doing a great job at the preserve. If you go down and look at the area that is immediately adjacent to the environmental center, you see that has been cleaned out, raked, and even made accessible. You can even see it from the sidewalks that walk down along it. Everyone worked very hard. I actually heard a lot of volunteers just literally saying, past weekend, as you know, the weather was picture perfect. I was even there at 5 a.m. and it was just, it was perfect. People are actually using it for meditation and yoga now. So some additional information as part of the borough's concentration on our water supply negotiations with Middlesex Water, and the borough administrator coordinated an evaluation of one of the large meter installations which showed a potential misreading of water volume. We'll need much more further evaluation to determine whether there's a revenue loss, but as you know, we've said over and over that part of the water problem was a loss of somewhere up to 31%. Yeah. We've actually started that cost containment program by doing the first large meter test and finding that there were, in fact, a misreading. So we'll be dealing with meter replacement in the future. And the borough administrator will be meeting with a PSE&G coordinator for a possible lighting and electrical replacement program. PSE&G is now offering to municipalities to assess our standard lighting and begin to replace everything with LED lighting. There's a funding formula that goes with it. It looks like a major and significant, not only for sustainability in LED, but in cost containment. If we replaced all these fluorescents with LEDs, you'd find that the air conditioning could drop by approximately 1 degree, saving significant amounts of money, not just in the electrical bills. I had a call from the coordinator of the program today, and I'll be speaking to the administrator. He would like to meet this week if possible, or early next. And that's all I have right now.
Okay, thank you. Speaking of the borough administrator, do you have a report?
A couple just quick ones. Some of you have probably heard, well, we have a state budget that was adopted. There were adjustments made to state aid to school districts. They're still figuring that out, which districts will get increased aid. As a result, they have delayed the certification of municipal budgets, which means we can't send out our tax bills as we normally would in the middle of July. So we are extending anticipating that. We've extended the deadline for taxes for the third quarter to, I believe it's August 30th. There's a resolution in there. So I just wanted to, I know that's been a question that people have already started coming into Borough Hall with, so I want to make sure people were aware that we're aware, and as soon as we get our numbers from the state, we will be up and running with getting the bills out. Just a quick reminder that we just started our summer hours. They start in July through the end of August. That just means we are off on Fridays, but we are open later on other days. So Mondays and Wednesdays, 8 to 5:30. Tuesday, 8 to 6, which is our usual hours on Tuesday. Thursdays, 8 to 4. So I just wanted to remind you all, so you don't get frustrated if you try to come in and meet with some of us. And then the last thing I just mentioned, we've sent some notifications out regarding PSE&G is starting their 2018 program to do infrastructure upgrades on their old gas lines throughout town. There's a select number of streets that they'll be targeting this year. Information's already gone out and is available on our website and on Facebook. I'm not going to read off all the street names. If you're an affected household, you would have gotten a letter from PSE&G. I believe their first road I can mention will be Hilton Street, which they've already gotten started either today or tomorrow. So just putting that in case you're driving around and seeing some work being done, that's what's going on. And if you have any questions, you can just holler and we'll try to answer them.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of things. I was delighted to spend some time at the Senior Center this afternoon to see the bluegrass and ice cream event that was being held. I saw some of you there. It was a wonderful event, and it happens every year. I hope to see more people there. You don't have to be a senior to go and enjoy the bluegrass music there. Council President George gave you an update on the solar field. I just want to give you a little more on the microgrid program. As you know, we got a pretty sizable grant from the state to conduct a microgrid feasibility study. The data is being crunched right now, and we anticipate the analysis and feasibility study will be complete sometime in September. I also want to talk about HP Gives a Hoot. It's been a while since I spoke about them. As you know, HP Highland Park Gives a Hoot is a program we started a few years ago when we found some of our children wandering around looking for lunch when school was not in session. And over the years, they have been funded by donations and some grants, but primarily donations from residents and others to help keep our children fed. This year, the lunch program has moved over to the Global Grace Cafe, which is a completely sustainable program for us now. We're able to feed our children, and they're all getting lunch while school is closed, but also the people who work the Global Grace Cafe are recent immigrants or refugees to this country. And with them working there, they are able to provide a living for themselves. So our funding for HP Gives a Hoot not only feeds our children, but helps to feed recent residents of Highland Park. I want to thank the committee that's been working on this. They tell me they are giving approximately 10 meals a day out at the church. Also, Councilman Fine spoke a little bit about our resolution number 184, which is a resolution that the council will be voting on later this evening that condemns what's going on, separating children from their parents. And I just received today a letter from Assemblywoman Nancy Pinkin that I'd like to read to you. It's addressed to the Highland Park Council. I am writing to commend the proposal of and convey my full support for Resolution 718-184, resolution to reunite children and parents separated by U.S. authorities under the Trump administration zero-tolerance policy. You are taking a bold but necessary step in standing up against zero-tolerance policy of the Trump administration, and I could not be more proud to represent you in Trenton. By supporting H.R. 6254, the compassionate calling of Immigrant Family Reunification Act of 2018, sponsored by Congressman Frank Pallone Jr., who is our congressman, you are showing to the world that New Jersey stands against these draconian and immoral practices at every level of our government. Recently, the New Jersey State Assembly passed Resolution ACR 180, urging Congress to support the Keep Families Together Act, and it is encouraging to see a similar resolution being considered by the Highland Park Council. A policy of tearing families apart is reprehensible. It is contrary to the ethos that this country stands for. Families come to the United States seeking refuge from war, violence, and economic hardship. Our country was founded by immigrants seeking better lives. It is in these times that we must put ourselves into the positions of those arriving at our borders, scared but hopeful for an opportunity that could change their life for the better. President Trump and Attorney General Sessions must end these policies. Once again, I commend you and support the resolution. Every action we take will bring meaningful change. Sincerely, Assemblywoman Nancy Pinkin. And while we're on the topic of immigration and refugee policies, you notice that Councilman Matt Hirsch is not sitting in his seat there. He had to depart from the council because of a really great opportunity he was given to serve the BPU down in Trenton. And I was very sorry to see him leave the council. He, in his short time here, did some wonderful things for this community, and including the immigrant and refugee families that we were just talking about. The council will be interviewing candidates that have been given to them by the Democratic Committee, and those candidates will be interviewed on July 17th, and the council will select one of the 3 people that have been put forward. Thank you.
Mayor, can I say something?
Sure.
This week was the start of the Junior Cadet Academy, and I had the opportunity to stop in and they were here in Borough Council chambers, and as they were going through their routines, and it was about 50 young people from our school system that signed up for the program. And I was told that unfortunately they had to turn away some students because we were out of capacity. So next year I think we'll have even more students getting involved, and look forward to seeing our cadets as when they graduate.
Okay, thank you. And now we're ready for our public discussion session. This is the first of 2 sessions. Please be reminded that we can only allow 15 minutes for this first session. I am going to ask each speaker to limit themselves to 3 minutes, and the borough clerk will let us know when those 3 minutes are up. So if you'd like to speak, and you don't get a chance to talk in the first session, there's more time to speak at the second public discussion session. Okay, Robin, please state your name and address.
Robin Lowenstein, 116 South 4th Avenue. I prepared so that I could speak quickly. I'm basically here to set the record straight. I watched the video of last month's Borough Council meeting as well as the video of the June 27th special meeting about first aid services in Highland Park, and there are many contradictions and untruths. At the special meeting, residents were frustrated because they heard that bringing in RWJ to answer all daytime calls was related to budget. Then they were told it wasn't only because of budget. They were told that it was because of response time, and then they were told that it wasn't exactly because of response time. When asked exactly what the issue really is, the best answer given was that there's some fuzzy issues, and when the residents said we have a right to know, they were glossed over and the mic was handed to someone else. Ladies and gentlemen, here is our deep, dark secret. We are a group of very passionate people who desperately want to serve the community. It's not uncommon at our monthly business meetings for members to shout and argue, as many of you do in your homes and in other organizations. I'm not condoning this behavior, but I 100% assure you that nobody can ever say we argue with each other, or for that matter, act in any way unprofessional on the ambulance. Our punishment, no, the punishment to the residents is that a paid service is being called in to answer calls during the day. The deep, dark secret of the Public Safety Committee is that they unknowingly believed information given to them by a few disgruntled squad members, none of whom ride full-time on our ambulances. Once it became clear that the majority of what the committee was told was untrue, and even the response time statistics were extremely tainted, it was too late. The rash decision had been made, and there was no way for the council to gracefully turn back. The current negotiations go something like this. We might consider letting you ride during the day on the weekends if you agree to 17 conditions. Folks, the conditions have no connection to our performance on the ambulance. Most of it is about information that we will gladly provide, but have not been asked for prior to now. I must urge the council to stop this balderdash. I'm sorry to say that when people give incorrect information, it is taken as truth. The squad was publicly accused at the last meeting of firing 2 specific people, one of whom moved to California and the other of whom continues to be a life member of the squad. We very rarely remove anyone, and when we do, it's generally because they've broken the law. The same source of information indicated that the reason there are so few people available during the day to take your call is because most of our members have left the squad to join the fire department or Hatzalah. Ladies and gentlemen, that is categorically untrue. The reasons that people sometimes find it difficult to get daytime crews have already been addressed. Working multiple jobs, employers not letting people leave work to answer, very few shift workers left, and so on, so on. Right now, we have crews available, and we certainly hope that that continues to be the case. All we ask is to go back to the way things were. If we need to trim down the time to get mutual aid into town, there's ways to do that. Right now, there is no contract with RWJ, and they are billing They're coming in as mutual aid, and they can bill any way they see fit. This has been going on since June 6th. The system is not working. In the past 2 days, there have been several mix-ups. On Sunday evening, someone came banging on our door, which is a common occurrence, yelling, "Josh, Josh, somebody's having a seizure." The EMTs in my house ran outside. Josh got on his radio and asked dispatch to please call Robert Wood Johnson. Someone's having a seizure at such and such address. The next thing we knew, our pagers were alerting us about the call. Since it was not our duty hours, luckily we had enough people that heard the alert and answered. There were also enough to answer the next two, that's 3 calls in a row, that were not even in our given duty time.
Robin, it's 3 minutes. Do you want to give the rest of it to someone else?
Sure.
Can I give Robin my 3 minutes?
No, why don't you just take the next 3 minutes?
I don't understand why she just can't continue to read what I got here.
Say your name.
David Lowenstein, 116 South 4th Avenue. The real reasons that it's sometimes difficult to get daytime crews have been addressed. People working multiple jobs, employers not allowing people to leave work to answer, very few shift work, etc. I believe that's been read, I'm sorry. This system is not working. We talked about that as well. There was also enough to answer the next 3 calls. This is important. By the way, I also called on my radio to dispatch to ask them to dispatch. Not a single answer on Channel 4. It took a firefighter who was there to call on his cell phone to say, "We need an ambulance." I have no idea why nobody's monitoring Channel 4. Since it was not our duty hours, we were lucky enough that we had the people to answer. With regard to the 2 more tangible reasons that we were given for our coming off the road, we are prepared to absolutely refute the statistics the town has. Reason, our response time, and are awaiting a clear answer about funding. We were told verbally by a council person that there will be no more funding for the squad. On the video of last meeting, I believe the mayor said that would be effective in 2019. We really need to know which it is. As long as I have a few more seconds, I'd like to point out that at last month's meeting, as we asked who would be supplying oxygen to the police if our funding is cut, and we were told it would be discussed. At the special meeting, Ms. Foster Dublin promised residents a spreadsheet or something of that nature regarding specifics of the breakdown of what expenses the town pays towards the squad. I hope there are answers to those points available tonight. I have one more, I'm sorry. Last night at 9:30, well into our duty time, someone got a paid service bill, and certainly will get the bill, because the dispatcher didn't realize what time it was. The system is not working. We need to go back to calling Robert Wood Johnson only when we don't have a crew available.
Just state your name and address.
Okay. My name is Ellen Witt. Let's see. And I live at 20 South 1st Avenue. I appreciate the council's decision to adopt the resolution to reunite children and their parents separated under the Trump administration's zero tolerance policy. But I also think the council should not only call for reunification of families, but also the release of these families and all others from immigrant detention cells, and an end to deportation. In New Jersey alone, over 1,500 asylum seekers, immigrants seeking legal status, and green card holders are languishing in these detention centers just here in our own state. In addition, over a year ago, the council passed the Inclusive Communities Resolution, which included a point restricting the use of borough resources to assist with immigration enforcement. At that time, it was clear that this point would be fleshed out with further details through an executive order from the mayor and a police directive from the chief of police to make it clear to personnel in Highland Park how to respond to any requests from ICE. I understand that due to other unrelated issues, the executive order, and as far as I know, the police directive, have never been issued. This has been well over a year ago, I think May of last year, that the original resolution passed. I believe the text of the executive order was written months ago, and I recognize that council members have been busy with other things, but I think it is critical that we get the policies in place now, especially since we know that ICE has been here at least 3 times in recent months. In addition, the final resolution does not appear to be posted on the borough's website. Only a draft copy is there. So I would like to know what steps that the council will take to get the executive order and police directive completed before the next council meeting.
Thank you, Ellen. As far as an executive order, I don't think I've ever seen the copy for an executive order. So I will have to check with the Immigration and Refugee Task Force to see if they have something. I'm happy to take a look at that. I think what's going on in this country that was built on immigrants is disgusting. Not having the executive order has, I don't know what happened, okay? And Council President George, you were just mentioning something?
Yeah, just briefly, part of the issue, as you know, was the concern over the sanctuary cities. The first case in California has just been decided that the Trump administration's refusal to fund or otherwise support sanctuary cities was decided, I believe, last week.
There's been multiple decisions.
Yeah,
along
but
those lines across
the one,
the past
well,
year.
hold on. The one that everyone was watching was the California case because of its broader reach. And now that that's been decided, I think we can certainly move forward with the appropriate executive orders. That was one of the concerns, was that litigation, especially the one targeted in California because it was so broad.
Yeah, and as far as the getting the draft off the website, that's something that we can take care of, right?
It's in the minutes. It's in the minutes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Please state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Herb Gross. I live at Adelaide Gardens. Tonight, I want everyone to know in this room and all the residents that are watching television, I fully support the Highland Park First Aid Squad. These men and women, for many years, have given their time and energy to safeguard every single resident in Highland Park, the men, women, and children. Over the past week or so, I've listened to a lot of people express their opinion, and I respect everyone's opinion, but I didn't hear anybody mention the athletes that we have here in Highland Park. And this bothers me. The athletes deserve your full attention, and they deserve the full support of everyone and the Highland Park First Aid Squad. We have athletes that are playing football with the coming season, baseball, basketball, the young girls that are playing soccer, basketball, and all the other sports. These athletes deserve your support, and they deserve the support from their families. But I have not heard anybody mention the athletes, and that includes every member of this council. And Councilman, I listened to your report concerning Robert Wood Johnson, and I do not agree with you or whoever wrote your speech. And I'm going to explain this to you, my remarks. I know quite a number of the drivers down in New Brunswick that drive the ambulance. They belong to my veterans post, so I know what I'm talking about. They tell me that they will come into Highland Park to service anyone who has an emergency, but their priority is in New Brunswick. They will get to Highland Park, but they can't say if it's going to be immediately or a half an hour later. And this is not right. We in Highland Park, for many years, I know better than this mayor and better than anybody on this council.
Mr. Gross, I'm sorry, I have to stop you. It's 3 minutes, and everybody's getting 3 minutes now.
I haven't spoken no 15 minutes yet.
No, 3 minutes. It's 3 minutes a person. The total time is 15 minutes.
Well, I haven't spoken no 15 minutes yet.
No. Each person, I'm sorry, each person gets 3 minutes at this portion. If you would like to come up and speak again later at the second portion, you
Well,
can.
I haven't spoken no 15 minutes yet.
No, Mr. Gross, it's 3 minutes. The other people had to sit down when they...
I'm not going to deny anyone to speak.
No, Mr. Gross, I understand that. I'm just saying that in this portion, and can you hear me? In this portion of the meeting, each person gets 3 minutes. So there are people standing behind you, and I think we have time for one more person. So if you don't mind sitting down and letting the person standing behind you speak, please. Thank you.
I don't need your thanks.
Hi, please state your name and address.
Hi, my name is Marcia Goldberg. My address is 451 South Fifth Avenue. And I'm here to talk on another subject about Buck Woods. To recap, Buck Woods is the 4-acre wooded ravine on the south side. At the last council meeting, I talked about the tree cutting permit that had been granted by the borough to the owner of the property, Jack Morris, a permit to cut 179 trees for environmental testing. Thanks to the work of the attorney my husband and I retained, Stuart Lieberman, that permit has been temporarily stayed by the appellate court, and that was discussed at the last meeting. The permit violated the borough's own code for tree removal in several ways. It would have allowed removal of mature trees from very steep slopes and with no provision made for how subsequent destabilization of the slope would affect neighboring property, I would add. And that is in an area with a culverted stream that's home to wildlife, especially deer, that would be displaced. Several knowledgeable people have confirmed for us that cutting trees from steep slopes in order to do such testing is unnecessary, expensive, and wasteful. However, it is a convenient way to prepare property for development. So where are we now? JSM is continuing to challenge the stay that we obtained, and we've just found out that we have a court date on July 30th. Meanwhile, during the time that residents with property adjacent to the woods were voicing our concern to the mayor and the council last month, the borough's consultants negotiated an agreement during a fairness hearing on May 31st. And the fairness in this case refers to fair housing. According to a June 20th document, and if I have any of the details of this, I'm not that used to reading legal documents, so please correct me. According to my understanding of the June 20th document from Superior Court related to the May 31st fairness agreement, Highland Park has resolved its affordable housing obligations in part by adopting an, in quotes, overlay zoning permitting 75 dwelling units on the JSM property. Is that correct? According to this court document, the borough, and I'm quoting again, provided proper, public, and actual notice of the fairness hearing with a deadline of May 7th for any member of the public to file written objections to the settlement, and that no such objections were received. So my question is, how was that proper, public, and actual notice delivered? Because I never saw any such thing.
It was published in a newspaper?
It was published in the newspaper.
Right. Home News, general circulation newspaper here in Highland Park.
Now, it is 2018, and many people do not read the newspaper, and there was no other way of notifying the public? Because if you're not anticipating something like this...
Right. The court directed that we publish notice in the newspaper. That's what we did.
Okay. Well, that just does not seem like a fair kind of notice, considering that the residents that have been living adjacent to Buck Woods have always been told in the 17 years that I've lived there that we would be kept in the loop. Marcia, I'm sorry, it's the 3-minute thing. So you can come back at the second portion if you like. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. I think we're at 15 minutes. Okay, so we're going to have to stop this portion because we're only allowed to go 15 minutes. And anybody who hasn't spoken, please stick around for the second portion. It won't be too far from now. Okay. can you please report on advertising and notification of Main Street Highland Park 2018 budget for consideration of passage on final reading by title?
The 2018 Main Street Highland Park budget was introduced and approved on first reading on June 12, 2018. A summary was duly advertised in the Home News Tribune on Friday, June 15th, with the public hearing scheduled for July 10th. Copies of the budget were made available to the public in Borough Hall in the Highland Park Public Library.
Okay, may I have a motion to take up the Main Street Highland Park budget on final reading by title?
So moved.
I'll second.
Any public hearing? Okay, may I have a motion to adopt the resolution MSHP 2018 budget on final reading by title?
Motion to adopt.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Fine?
Yes.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin?
Yes.
Councilman George?
Yes.
Councilwoman Kim Chohan?
Yes.
Councilwoman Welkowitz?
Yes.
Clerk, would you please report on advertising the salary ordinance amendment for consideration of passage on final reading by title?
An ordinance to provide for and determine the rate and compensation of each officer and employee of the Borough of Highland Park and the method of payment of such compensation was duly advertised for consideration of passage on final reading by title, and affidavits of publication are on file. The ordinance was posted and made available for public inspection as required by law.
May I have a motion to take up the ordinance on final reading by title?
I'll move.
Second.
Okay.
Roll call.
Public hearing.
Okay, any public hearing? Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt or reject the resolution and advertise the ordinance on final reading by title?
Also move.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Fine?
Yes.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin?
Yes.
Councilman George?
Yes.
Councilwoman Kim Chohan?
Yes.
Councilwoman Welkowitz?
Yes.
Clerk, can you please report on introduction of downtown redevelopment ordinance amendment for consideration of passage on first reading by title?
Ordinance of the Borough Council of the Borough of Highland Park, County of Middlesex, adopting an amendment to the Highland Park Downtown Redevelopment Plan relating to property commonly known as 130 and 134 Raritan Avenue, pursuant to the local redevelopment and housing law, NJSA 40A:12A-1, has been introduced in writing by the Economic Development and Planning Committee for consideration of passage on first reading by title.
May I have a motion to adopt or reject and advertise the ordinance on first reading by title?
Motion to adopt?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Fine?
Yes.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin?
Yes.
Councilman George?
Yes.
Councilwoman Kim Chohan?
Yes.
Councilwoman Welkowitz?
Yes.
Madam Mayor, may I ask the clerk, the final reading, the public discussion on that'll be the next meeting, August 14th?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, may I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda items number 15 through number 31?
Mayor, at this time, I'd ask Councilman Fine as the sponsor from HR if we could remove 184. I believe the council members would want to address it, and I'd like to address it as well.
This evening, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, not to
just put it
move it, just to remove it from the consent agenda.
So you can have more discussion.
I'd accept that.
Motion.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You're moving, who's seconding?
Second.
Okay.
Moving it separately so people can vote.
Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody else? Anybody else?
Aye.
That's just to separate, that's not voting.
Right.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Then I'd like to amend the motion I just asked for to, on the consent agenda, to adopt items number 15 through 23, and then item number 25 through 31. Okay.
No, I didn't know.
I'm sorry, item number, I'm just realizing it, item number 18, we had to hold off because we didn't hear back in time, so that was it. I I should have caught that prior, I apologize.
So we're going to table 18?
Table 18 to
I
the
need a
next
motion
meeting.
to table
Sorry,
number
I really
18.
apologize. I just-
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, I'm going to try this for the third time now, you guys. May I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda items number 15 through 17, numbers 19 through 23, numbers 25 through 31? Motion? Anybody?
So move with the exception of 184 and 18. Those were the numbers you accepted. I'll move the consent agenda as amended.
Okay, can I have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
We all need a drink. Councilman Fine.
Yes.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin.
Yes.
Councilman George.
Yes.
Councilwoman Kim Chohan.
Yes.
Councilwoman Welkowitz.
Yes.
Now, the one that we just tabled is number 184. Can I have a motion?
We tabled 180. We removed 184 from the consent agenda for separate consideration.
Right, right. So now can we have a vote on item number 718-184, the resolution to reunite children and parents? May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I'd like to know if Councilman Fine, as the sponsor from HR, would accept an amendment to add a mandatory directive request to the governor of the state of New Jersey, the New Jersey Attorney General, and the Commissioner of Health and Human Services to direct the Department of Children and Family Services to immediately inventory every institution in the state of New Jersey which has a contract with the United States government or any of its branches to determine whether there are any children who are separated by any form being warehoused in any of the institutions in Camden, Union, Hudson, or Bergen County, and immediately direct that the institution be closed unless and until those children are repatriated with their parents.
I'd accept that.
Thank you.
Did you get all of that?
No.
Okay.
He can send that to me.
May I ask a question? If those institutions are closed, what then happens to the children? They're moved to another state?
They're repatriated. The demand is to have them repatriated or reunified with their children,
Can I-
repatriated with their children.
Can I make a suggestion? Because it looks like the council wants to discuss this further. And I'd also like to get legal counsel's input on that as well, given Susan's question. Why don't we vote on the resolution
And then
as it
maybe
currently
adjust
exists
and
and go back into conference to discuss it further? And we can amend it and then have the amended one voted on at the next council meeting.
I would accept that.
Okay? So now I'm going to ask again for a motion to adopt Resolution 718-184 with the expectation it will be discussed further for modification in the future. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Fine.
Yes.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin.
I find that this is particularly troubling as a person who slavery the act of slavery was to separate children from their families, to tear families apart, and to put us in a situation as black people where we did not have a voice, we did not come from a nurturing family environment. I can't stand by and sit and have this being done to another set of minority group of people that's coming into this country. We weren't brought here of our own free will. We were torn from our native country and brought here. And here are people who are coming for refuge to the land of Lady Liberty. And we're separating their children and putting them in cages and, again, tearing families apart. I vote yes.
Councilman George?
In my family's background, there's also slavery, and they're being treated as property. This is even worse. This is a political maneuver to pander to a particular audience, and the damned man doesn't even care as long as he gets airtime and Facebook time. It is despicable. I vote in favor of the resolution.
Councilwoman Kim Chohan?
Yes, I do agree with the resident that did speak prior that this resolution needs to have more teeth, and I look forward to working with council to modify the resolution. Yes.
Councilwoman Welkowitz?
I agree. I think we should pass this now and work to strengthen it.
Okay. Can I have a motion to adopt or reject Chapter 159 Clean Communities Grant?
Motion to adopt?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Fine?
Yes.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin?
Yes.
Councilman George?
Yes.
Councilwoman Kim Chohan?
Yes.
Councilwoman Welkowitz?
Yes.
All right. It is with great pleasure that I am appointing the following. Laurent Reyes to Immigration and Refugee Task Force, and Michelle Racciopi, Harold Glazer, Bernice Bernstein, Don Beetham, Irina Radiva, Raul Fradkini, Jeremy Gross, Anna Parrott, Tom Glynn, and John Beetham to the Historical Commission. I also, with great pleasure, appoint Matthew Hirsch to the Human Relations Commission. And I also, with pleasure, appoint Sesh Venugopal to the Library Board of Trustees. May I have a motion to confirm?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Fine?
Yes.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin?
Yes.
Councilman George?
I'll miss Councilman Hirsch. We reached the same conclusion from oftentimes very different points of view. And what many of you may not know is we had what people perceive as the conservative or more refined side, and his radical side, conversations 2 or 3 times a week to discuss all these issues. And I truly miss those conversations, but I look forward to working with them, and I vote yes.
Councilwoman Kim Chohan?
Yes, and I just want to comment, the Historic Commission still has some alternate members if you're interested in joining. They're doing some great things, and if you have some articles and different things that you would like to put on display here, in our case, we welcome them and be a part of Highland Park's history. And yes.
Councilwoman Welkowitz?
Yes.
Okay. Now we're going to go into the second session of public discussion. I'm going to ask that people who have not spoken yet, please come up to the microphone first. And if you have spoken, just wait till those who have not yet spoken have a chance to talk. Okay, who's coming first? Yes. Please state your name and address.
Hi, my name is...
Let's keep it down so everybody can hear, please.
My name is Nicholas Winter. I live at 215 South 4th Avenue. I'm one of the individuals that was, in some sense, unfortunate enough to require medical assistance Sunday night, but was, on the other hand, lucky enough to be assisted by the Highland Park First Aid Squad. I honestly know very little about the decision about whether to use Robin Wood Johnson or the Highland Park First Aid Squad, but I can say that I was treated with the utmost respect and professionalism by them, and I am in their debt. I have used, I've been transported to a Robin Wood Johnson hospital in the past when I was living on Livingston campus as a graduate student at Rutgers, and I can say that that mile-and-a-half ambulance ride cost me $2,000. As a graduate student, that was 10% of my salary. Here I received the same treatment for free. And as a strong proponent of single-payer healthcare, and as a strong believer that there is something seriously wrong with healthcare in this country, I think solutions like those the Highland Park First Aid Squad provides are essential. So thank you very much.
So first of all, I want to say I'm glad to see you standing and talking in front of us. That's very good. One of the things that we are being very sensitive to is the potential cost of the ambulance service. So I think Councilwoman Foster Dublin may have mentioned before that in any contract that we might enter into, we would want to make sure that payment was being addressed.
Glad to hear that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Karen, and I live 242 South 6th Avenue. I want to talk about the ambulance. 2 years ago, Robert Wood came when I still have to pay the money that he came. When the gentleman gave me the phone number, and that's not right. I called them 3 times because he told me I can call and tell them that I have a hard time. And the lady says she never hear of this.
Yeah, like I said, Karen, we're also very concerned about the cost element, and that is something we would have to address in any contract we signed with them.
So I'm paying already 2 years on it.
Yeah.
And I'd be pretty sure where I live, they all missed the Highland Park ambulance.
Yeah.
Because the office was nice. And,
yeah, I think all of us have had good experiences with them in the past. I will never forget when my own father was passing away. You know, they were wonderful. Sometimes things change, and sometimes the world changes, and we have to address them.
Yeah, but if you know we're seniors, we don't have all that money.
And that's right.
He charged me like $500.
Yeah.
I know they don't, but I pay every month.
Right.
But the gentleman, I don't know why he gave me the wrong number.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we did not have a contract with them when you used their services. So we, you know, because we haven't entered into any kind of contract with them yet. So again, you know, that is something that we will be extremely sensitive to in any negotiations with them. And I'm sorry you're in that situation you're in.
All right. Good evening.
Please state your name and address.
Angela.
You can put the mic on.
242 South 6th Avenue. I'm here this evening to discuss what's going on 6th Avenue. I have some pictures here. I have been working with Mr. Hirsch, who is now no longer on the council. I have been working with Officer Gary and the Commission for Universal
Access.
Okay, I've been a resident here for 2 years. I am disabled. There's a handicap ramp that has not been marked. Cars are parking in front of fire hydrants. The sidewalks are in disrepair, and the seniors use this constantly. Okay, and if anybody falls, they're going to have to call the rescue squad, and they're going to charge them $1,000. Can we get these things fixed?
So I'm looking at the borough administrator now. Terry, if you could have Scott go out there and take a look at
Yeah, and I'll reach out to Lieutenant Panicello as well to get the background.
Here's those pictures. If you need me to form and go over them, I'd be happy to.
Okay. Well, I don't want to take your. You want to leave these with me, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I would like it to get resolved. I mean, it's been.
It's the first time hearing it, but I
2
promise
years.
to look into it.
Well, your councilman then isn't doing his job.
Please state your name and address.
What? Oh, okay. I was going to.
Okay.
My name is Irene Rigner. I live in River Ridge, and this is something that happened to me during the evacuation. As you know, about June 11th, River Ridge on South Adelaide had a fire on the 8th floor. I live on the 4th floor. This is what happened to me, and this is what I was told occurred. I understand that the 7th and 8th floors were evacuated. Each unit has a fire alarm, and I understand that the fire alarms went off in the units on these floors. I further understand that the 2nd floor was evacuated next, and that the fire alarms sounded in each apartment. Then, for some reason, third floors 3 through 6 were evacuated. But instead of sounding the fire alarm, police or fire officials, I don't know who, went from apartment to apartment knocking on doors to get people out. I have a hearing problem. They forgot one person, me. I have a hearing problem. I didn't hear a knock and continued working on my computer in the back room, oblivious to what was happening. In other words, I didn't know about the fire and didn't know about the evacuation. What if this fire had spread to the lower floors? I would have been trapped in my apartment. As part of your investigation, I would like to know why the fire alarms on the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th floors were not sounded. The fire alarm works, at least in my unit. The next day, they tested the alarm, and I had no problem hearing it. In fact, it woke me up. Again, I ask, why wasn't the fire alarm sounded on the 4th floor and on the 3rd, 5th, and 6th floors during the fire? I would like to know the result of this investigation and of my question in particular, and what corrective action is being done. Timely communication, especially in this matter, could be a matter of life. Thank you. I have a statement for the people.
Well, I'm going to ask the police chief, Chief Risco, who's also our public safety director. Chief Risco, do you or any of the lieutenants want to explain, what the fire department's procedure was that night?
Well, I think that has to do more with the alarm system that we'll have to take up with River Ridge and maybe
Okay.
fire marshal and code inspectors.
Okay.
I'm not sure what happened or why that may have occurred, but it's private property. But River Ridge has to comply with any codes that are in place. So
Right.
we'll check it out.
Also, I don't know, where'd she go? Where is she? Oh, okay. The other thing is, I'm sorry, I missed your name.
Irene Reader.
Irene. Yeah. Sorry. It would be, sure, how's that too? I'm not sure what the policy in your building is. I do know there are other buildings where the person who sits at the desk has a list of people who live there.
From what I understand, they, next to wherever they sound the alarm, they have a list of people who are handicapped.
Okay.
And as you know, we have many handicapped,
Yes.
seriously handicapped people in my building. And apparently I'm on that list. What the people did with that list, I don't know.
Okay, okay, all right. Thank you. Please state your name and address.
Fred Cole, 214 Donaldson Street. I want to commend the council for their stance on the the Trump administration. Close, no cigar, but no cigar. For the separation of the immigrant families. I think my frustration, and I'm sure many people, is the secrecy that it's done, the way we find out about it, and the out-of-control feeling that I have personally that this is being done in our names, United States of America, or doing this to families.
Yeah.
So I want to compare that, however, to what's going on with Buck Woods. It really ticks me off when your lawyer says it was in the newspaper. That's nonsense. Where was it? When was it done? You don't know, I'm sure. Or if you do, when can you tell us to look at it and find out? There's that same secrecy and out-of-control feeling that we have, those who are concerned about Buck Woods, that this thing is a done deal, it's being done by power brokers, and that you really kind of want it to happen, or if you don't, you're certainly not letting us know what's going on.
So let me address something, because you and I think it was Ellen spoke about it before. No, it was Marcia. So, I know that there are protocols that we follow in terms of announcing information, and I know even things like notices we put out for meetings, et cetera, and I read every council meeting that it was posted in the Home News Tribune and on a wall here. But we are living now in the 21st century, and there are other forms of communication that a lot of people go by. We have a Facebook page, for instance. Does it make sense for us to announce important things on our Facebook page? Can there be a place on our website that people can go to that says, here's upcoming news for you, or something like that? I'm going to rely on our new public information officer to come up with something, but are we allowed to use other forms of communication? And if we can, I think we have to get into the habit of doing that.
Gail, I think that would be a great first step, and a continued step, I'd hope, to inform the public about what's going on with this. I think there are a lot of people who live in Highland Park who want to see that space remain green and natural, who would like to see it developed as a public place that people can use, like the train tracks in Metuchen, where there's a walkway, just as a very close, for instance, in a similar town to ours. But I really feel like you can't say, sir, that it was in the newspaper and that makes it okay. It's not okay. Your job is to serve us and work with us, and I think you do a very good job with that, and I mean that. But in this case, you're not serving us, you're working against our interest inadvertently. Don't think that's right, and I'd like to see what you're saying happen. Please, Gail, it's really important. This is a big issue to this town about the nature of what our town is.
Right. I do also want to talk for a second about the whole Buck Woods situation, because, Fred, as you know, we've been living this since, I think, 1999 or so. We do, the guy does own the property, and though for years we've been trying to, and attorney, you can tell me to be quiet because of litigation, if I'm talking and I shouldn't be talking, because we are in several litigations with this particular property owner. For years we've been trying to keep it as open space, but the guy owns the property. Should he be allowed to build something that goes against riparian buffers and that sort of thing? We raised those issues, but the courts, I guess, take precedence over our own laws. In other words, we have guidelines that say you can't build near steep slopes, there are riparian buffers and that sort of thing, but even though we have those, if the courts say that somebody is allowed to do something, do they override our own zoning laws?
No, not necessarily. We, as the mayor indicated, we've been in litigation over this property since 2009, and we refused to issue permits for the removal of the trees. As a private owner, he went to court and said that he believes the property is polluted and that it needs to be cleaned up, and that he owns the property and he wants to do that. That was the basis for his argument to the court about a year ago to say, as a private property owner, I should be given the right to test my property and determine where or if it's polluted. Now, the debate that's going on right now, which will be discussed with Judge Hurley on the 30th of this month, is whether or not it's necessary to take down the trees in order to test for any pollution on the property, or can there be a less invasive way to do that? And the Judge Hurley will discuss that at a case management conference on July the 30th. But the borough has, we've discussed with them the purchase of the property over the last almost 10 years, and the individual who owns the property, his corporation, does not want to sell it to the borough and wants to develop that property. And that's basically what we're stuck with.
Thank you. Please state your name and address.
Yair Rosenthal, 451 South Fifth Avenue. I'm Marshall Goldberg husband. I was going to talk about what Fred, and I read actually the agreement. And specifically, the court solicited public response. And then it says that on May 7th that there was no public response. So I don't understand this discrepancy. We have been dealing with this. It was big on our agenda for 17 years in this borough. You say 2009, we were involved in 2000. Yet, you know, you guys did not find any opportunity or better way to tell us that we have actually the right, as the court says, to respond publicly to these plans. So something is wrong there, and I don't want to see a Facebook on other things. I want to go back and actually repeal these things and let the public the opportunity to say what they have. Now, I'm also a professor of earth science at Rutgers University, and I'm saying it because in 2000, we studied the ecological impact, we studied the transportation impact. I don't know if you guys read the piles of studies that our expert brought. This would have a huge impact, but not just on my property. I mean, we are talking now about climate change. In previous surfaces, you're going to have flooding problem. You'll have deer problem. I don't understand this. Beside the interest in the development, this town has any expertise that you want. All of them professor at Rutgers, and no one actually thought that you should solicit our input. I don't think we should have a better way now to publish, to advertise. I think we should go back and try to go to the court and say, look, we didn't give a chance to the town. I mean, you represent us, not JSF. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, my name is Mary Beth Schmutz. I live on 55 Lincoln Avenue. And I was at the last meeting regarding the EMS situation. You were unable to give us, we asked for, specific information regarding response times. We assumed that you had done a study over a fairly long period of time to really, figure that out. You also are unable to tell us exactly how much money the town would save. For instance, you couldn't tell us how much the taxes were. The insurance was. And, there was an editorial in the New York Times, I believe it was last week, about ambulance services in New York City. And it had become a crisis because people are begging the police not to call ambulance services because they can't afford to pay for it. And a teacher just told me that happened at Highland Park High School where a student was injured, and she begged them not to call an ambulance because she didn't want to pay for it. She didn't know if she would have to or not. You also said you're going to cut EMS funding completely over time. So how are they going to continue to do this, continue at night? I heard that at the last meeting, that was happening. whether it is or not, what that means to me, they're probably not going to be able to do that. But the editorial in the New York Times described a catastrophic situation, and it's become a big problem in the city, where a young woman was very, crushed under a car or something, terrible shape, crying and begging them not to call an ambulance. I am very skeptical about your ability to, control the costs and keep it from going to collection. That's not how healthcare works, and we both know that won't work. I wouldn't be surprised 900 now doubles in a year. And wait a second, let me just finish. This is not the time, given the crisis in healthcare that's growing in this country, the attacks on Obamacare, to do anything to increase people's medical expenses. We should toe the line for now. This is not necessary. I mean, it would have, I think, and especially since we don't have any really hard information regarding response times over months, a long period of time, very specifically, and the records are there, you couldn't do it. You said you would, but you didn't. So we do have some response time. Not some, I mean over a long period of time.
Yeah, well, Lieutenant Hamill, do you want to talk a little about the records that you are keeping and getting ready?
Well, everything that we have is done through a CAD system, and those numbers are all available, but it's data mining. It's going to take some time.
Yeah, I think, though, this is such a big issue, and you'll notice a lot of seniors here because they're frightened of how this is going to impact them, and it will. Because, again, highly skeptical about your ability, the town's ability, to control the costs or reimburse people, or even for it not to go to collection. It's going to go to collection. You're using an outside private company. I'm not buying any of this. People will be harmed. This is not the time to be doing this to people's medical costs. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Please state your name and address, Mrs. Bickard.
You got it all right. Ruth Bickard, 307 Magnolia Street. I'm going on a different path. Please explain to me number 19 of the consent agenda, resolution to authorize Title 39 jurisdiction. What is that?
I believe that's to allow the police to enter. Do you want to answer?
Yeah, Ms. Becker, a long time ago, this is one of the developments, right? And a long time ago, when I was the liaison there, and in meeting with the different condo associations, they were concerned about some parking, but it was still a private road on paper. So that started, and this is about 2 years ago, calling it subject to Title 39. Title 39 is the New Jersey statutory provision for traffic laws, including parking. And what we need to do is simply designate that those roads will now be, the police will be allowed to enforce the state's traffic laws. That's all it means.
Okay. I'm just curious.
That's good. It's a good question. I asked the same question a few days ago.
Now you were talking in the beginning about something about plastic bags.
In my report, yes. Sustainable Highland Park. You remember starting in about March of 2017, they started a campaign to reduce the use of one-use plastic bags in all the stores.
I'd like to give you some advice on that subject.
Well, we can get your advice in a second. The program ran for the year. You remember at all the street fairs, they were giving out free bags. The signs were temporary signs. Now there's permanent signs. Please remember your recyclable bags. We all have them in our consoles. We hope we don't put them in our trunks where we forget them like I do. And everybody is trying to reduce the use of plastic bags. The program under the grant was 1 year, and as part of that, they had to close the program out with a survey. In the survey, the overwhelming amount of people, it's about 800, I think, support a ordinance in town to either restrict or discourage or ban plastic bags. So that's in that we're going to start planning that. It's in the very beginning.
Well, I would like to bring to your attention that close to 30 years ago, one of my daughters lived in Ohio, and I went to visit her and went shopping with her. And they had in different aisles 2 items express. That was considered express. If you didn't have a bag, it was a nickel, and a nickel bought a double-dip ice cream cone in those days. I think, I saw today, I was at the supermarket, someone took me, carts loaded to the top, each one, all with store plastic bags. If they would have had to pay a nickel for each bag, it would have easily cost them a couple of dollars, and a couple of dollars here and a couple of dollars there in the course of a week, and then they throw them out. I recycle when I get a plastic. My bread bag, because I buy the sliced bags, I throw my garbage in there. My tenants in my house, they look at me and they think I'm nuts. No. But that's how it is. I had one more question. Forgot it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bickard. Who's next? Anybody who hasn't spoken yet? Nobody else is speaking? So Mr. Gross.
For everyone to speak.
No, Mr. Gross.
Just to finish up briefly what I started to say. With all respect to the councilman here, I spoke with the drivers who are members of my post, and they told me, and they're very honest, they said they would come into Highland Park to take care of any emergency. But if they're on call in New Brunswick or Edison, that's where their priority starts. And this is why I am in favor of reinstating the Highland Park First Aid Squad right here. And just to finish up what I started to say, I'm going back now quite a few years, and I knew these gentlemen a little better than you, Mayor, and anyone on this council. I'm talking about Mayor Herbert Tansman, who did a remarkable job here in Highland Park, and the late Mayor Harold Berman, who I served with in the Marine Corps. These two mayors never, and I mean never, would have taken the first aid squad out of Highland Park. Never. And in conclusion, Mayor, I am holding you responsible. As far as I am concerned, this is a criminal act. And in case of any emergency, I am going to hold you responsible.
Good evening. Ira Smith, Lincoln Avenue. I just want to give you folks a couple of observations here, and one is communication. Has the council made a move to actually adopt this as a motion to post this on the website, post information about upcoming events?
So we don't need a resolution to do that. It's something that we have to handle internally.
So are you committed to doing that?
Oh, absolutely. I'm very much in favor of transparency. You know, sometimes we get caught up in the system in ways things have always been, and it's important for us to start looking at where we are today in the 21st century and means of communication.
So that's a yes.
Yeah.
You guys are going to start posting that. That's good. Another thing, I moved here from New York City several years ago, and I've seen the changes in many of the neighborhoods in New York City. That's part of what New York history is about. But I also observe a lot of changes going on in Highland Park over the last 20 years. And what I see happening is rather disturbing. Seems to be a move to turn Highland Park into Staten Island. Every conceivable space where there's a place that you can put up a condo or a building, there seems to be a big rush to do that here. But bigger isn't always better. And I've seen this with current plans on Walter and River Road, where certain plans have come into being, but that's another subject to be taken up at another time. But I also see it concerning Buck Woods as well. I think if all of us really want to maintain the character of Highland Park, we ought to sit back, take a look, and organize and not allow this to turn into Staten Island. Because what we moved here for is not going to be here for very much longer. So we're talking about a history committee. Start taking pictures now, because what you see today is not going to be here. So I want everybody to really think about what they want this town to become and why they moved here and why they still live here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Sonia Headlam from 133 Benner Street. I just wanted to going back to the beginning of the council meeting when, was it Mr. DeLacy is his name that came? I just wanted to express my sincere thanks to the council, to the mayor, to the police chief and the police department for taking such steps to address racial bias and racial disparities in policing in Highland Park. For some of us, this is a personal issue, and for that reason, I really am expressing sincere thanks to you for taking a serious look at that. I did want to ask just one question about, because he gave a very brief presentation, and it seemed that the scope of the analysis was going to be quite narrow, that he would just be focusing on traffic stops. That's what I heard tonight, and I just wanted to get confirmation if that is the case, if he will only be looking at traffic stops, and if that is the case, that just to encourage a look at broader issues that include the things that we see, the national trends of racial disparities in use of force, and marijuana arrests, and all different kinds of areas that we see across the nation. I think that we should be looking at that here in Highland Park as well. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Elsie Foster Dublin to answer your question.
When we reached out to Mr. DeLacy, our first concern was the report that was offered by that group, and that our police department have been collecting for a number of years. And we've asked him to go through that report with his team to review the material. That's phase one. And they'll get back to us with a report. Just to step back a little bit, in 2003, we did a report on the health of our town as it pertains to race relations. How do we see each other? How do we get along? And how do we address the issues that we have here in Highland Park? And what I would like to say, our small bedroom community, we do have issues. We had some major issues, and we seek to address them. For the past, say, 3 years, the council and I have been looking at, the report was done 15 years ago. It's time for us to see what is the next step. And we're at that pivotal point where we're looking at the next steps. The first report is going to be done, and then we need to take an inventory of ourselves and see how have we progressed, or how do we continue to progress? What are the latest issues that we should be looking at, and work on getting a report on how to address them.
So you are saying that this initial
report,
is
yes,
just on traffic stops?
The report that was done, that was offered by the People's Group. Yes, we're taking a look at that. That's our first step.
Great, okay.
But we're going to move forward.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Harold Sakrowitz, 617 South Fifth Avenue. I want to say a few more things about Buck Woods. My feeling is that when the court ruled that he could do his testing, whatever, I personally don't think that the town put in its best effort in fighting that. Because there was no discussions, you had no idea. A lot of us have been, as Ayer said, a lot of us have been doing this for 17 or so years, and there are a lot of things we know that could be presented at a hearing. What I would like to say is that before the next court date, that we have some sort of a meeting and we can tell you what sort of irregularities we see and what things you might present to the court. I was very upset also about that comment about, oh, it was in the newspaper, because that's a clear indication to me that it was not, you were not giving it your best effort.
So I think the idea of getting some information from you is a good one. Borough Attorney, would you be able to join us at a meeting at some point to talk about that?
Absolutely, yep, absolutely, before the 30th.
Right.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Hi, my name is Hannah Shostak, and I'm at 146 North 6th Avenue. And just to add to what Harold had just talked about, some suggestions for some of the topics that you might cover at the meeting is, first of all, it looks a little disingenuous because the developer is acting as if there's a development application. And were there to be a development application, it would trigger notification. The residents are at a disadvantage because they don't have the benefit of the notification that would otherwise happen if there was a development application. So that's where the borough can be really helpful if you were to have some kind of a public meeting on this, because obviously the only thing that the residents have now are the tree removal permit applications in the apropos to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where, I mean, with all your best intentions, and I'm sure you're very well intentioned, it looks a little disingenuous to the community where he's approaching you and it's acting as if he's a developer, the owner of record, and there's no development application.
So the last time that we had anyone from his organization come and open public meeting was when he was looking for the 75 trees down the center to be cut down. I think that was either 2016 or 2017. We should have had more meetings since that time.
Right.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
Okay, so there's a few other things. The issue of Mount Laurel. Mount Laurel involves the fair share plan and a vacant land inventory. Now that land looks, with the steep slopes and also having a mapped street, which seems to reflect the borough's intention, that the flattest part of the Buckwoods property is a mapped street on Highland Park's official map. So there seems to be some inconsistency about the intention of that property and Highland Park's own documentation. And that's something that it would be really helpful to the community if you could help reconcile the inconsistencies between a developer with a property with a mapped street that reflects Highland Park's official map. So that's another question that I think needs to be resolved.
I think if I could interrupt one more time, Borough Attorney, when we do have that meeting, we should probably also go through the whole COA history with the borough, how we got to this point.
And also, in the borough's vacant land inventory, does the Buckwoods property appear as developable in our vacant land inventory? I think that's a question, because if you look at the model site plan ordinance, which was adopted at the state level, this land should probably be exempt based on the steep slope alone. And if it is included in our vacant land inventory, the question is why? Because if you have to add all that fill, it raises questions about the stability. I mean, for those of us whose houses aren't built on fill in Highland Park, we already have issues of stability, stream, underground streams, etc. So if you're talking about adding enough fill to make that into a developable site, it makes the rest of us wonder about how you're going to do that, considering that we all have problems with underground streams and erosion and that sort of thing. So I think that's another question for the agenda for the meeting that you're planning, how you're going to do that. And besides which, there was a problem, there was an issue before of condemnation. Highland Park, the local newspapers that are online talked about ordinances to condemn the land, and then the discussion seemed to vaporize. So what happened to the condemnation discussions? Is the land polluted? And who's the responsible party?
Discussion, yeah, that's the bond.
So those are, I think, some of the important questions. And everybody is confused. It's very confusing. And if you could add some clarification to what's going on, I think it would be helpful to the neighbors and to the rest of us as well. One final comment.
I'm just getting a clarification. I'm sorry.
And one final just a point, because I am at the other end of town, but I've been affected personally, and so have my neighbors, and we talked about this, about the destruction of a habitat and the impact it has. And we have a lot of deer all around because of the cutting down of the trees at the other end of town on the Piscataway side of Highland Park. We have deer, we have deer ticks, we have traffic issues around having deer all over the place. And that will happen with the Buckwoods property. When if you were to destroy all the trees, we have public health issues, We have driver issues. We have older drivers in town. And that's something that we should also put on the agenda for this meeting, about what happens if you destroy that habitat.
Yeah, and just so you know, Councilwoman Foster Dublin is going to be having a conversation with Rick Lear, who handles the county's DARE situation, so we can see what can be done to help us.
So
Great.
looking into that.
Okay, that's excellent. Okay,
Thank
that's
you.
it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Deborah Burns. I live at 235 Wayne Street. Sorry?
Yeah.
Hello?
Well, you have to talk close to it.
You have to be very close to the microphone to make it work.
Deborah Burns, 235 Wayne Street. Working?
Mm-hmm.
No?
Better. Just pull it closer to you. Yeah.
You got to be kidding.
There you
go. Okay. All right. So I've lived here 7 or 8 years. I think it's a great place. One thing I've noticed, though, about the habits of the council in regard to the community, I think you miss the chance to have a tremendous amount of support for decent positions by not listening to people like the people who've just spoken, Yair and Hannah, and others. I mean, it's very difficult when, as a resident, when something is sort of presented as a done deal, when you haven't had any notification of it or any sense it was going on. Now you have that email thing where, I mean, I'm beginning to think that the council really should publish a list of litigation underway, what's at stake in the litigation, what neighborhoods are sort of threatened by the litigation. I mean, you would be provided, should you want a certain point of view from the neighbors, you would be provided with it if they knew about it. The other thing I want to say is, I want to speak, for the right to exist of that beautiful ravine. I mean, it's one of the last remaining spots in Highland Park. Highland Park is not a particularly green town at this point. It's going to be a whole lot greener if that goes. And everybody's talked about the result, to the environment, to the community, to the animals. But the thing itself is beautiful. There's no reason for it to be paved over. It's not going to do anybody any good. We don't need any more housing at this point. So I really hope there's a way for you to put the brakes on this. It would really be a bad thing for the borough. Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Gabrielle Wilders. I live at 24 Walter Avenue. I'm here tonight to support the people that live near Buck Woods, and also to reiterate that information from your office is a real problem. And although I was saddened to hear of their experience, it was validating, because that's what we on Walter Avenue had also experienced. We only heard through the rumor mill that the property at 31 River Road, which is right next to our home on the corner of Walter Avenue, was going to be developed. And at that point, it was, I don't know how many units. We heard a rumor of more than 50 units, and it was going to be this oversized structure. Our neighborhood collectively wrote a letter to the mayor's office. We were able to get heard. We were able to be seen before the screening committee. We were able to give input. However, I've seen the plan, the draft of the plan, that did not take a lot of our input into consideration. So I am disheartened about that. But what concerns me even more, in hearing all of other people's concerns, is the increase in density in Highland Park. I was, I think, at the corner of 2nd, trying to cross over from the south side to the north. It took me 3 traffic light changes before I was able to get through the intersection, because there was so much traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And that was at 2 o'clock on a weekday afternoon. It wasn't school, it wasn't a holiday. This was regular traffic time. So when we talk about increasing density, whether it's developing Buck Woods, which would be devastating to the environment and their neighborhood, and increasing density in a small little lot on the corner of Walter Avenue and River Road, what is traffic going to be? How can Highland Park even handle that? That has an impact on our lifestyles, on our environment, our schools, on everything.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned about that.
So the Raritan Avenue traffic, I believe the number is there's like 20,000 cars a day that go up and down Raritan Avenue. That's been for the last, I don't know, 10 years or so. We have, a lot of that traffic is not necessarily our traffic, but we have this, we're like the hub before the center of Middlesex County, where all these jobs and offices, et cetera. So that's the traffic that, you
And
know.
so these people that are going to be living in these new developments, they're going to be driving cars and driving to work. And then you add on top of that an ambulance that's going to have to come in an emergency from New Brunswick over that bridge somewhere into Highland Park. You're asking for a tragedy.
I don't know if we can talk about the ambulance. It's on, yeah.
I'm just saying that increasing density is really going to destroy a small town. And I see these decisions being made all over the place that are bad for our community, bad for the people, bad for nature. And I am very upset that you continue not to give us information. I have written emails that don't get answered. Tonight when you picked me to start the Pledge of Allegiance, I was shocked because I didn't even know you knew my name. You haven't replied to my email.
Oh,
so
Gabrielle.
this is a problem, Mayor. Please,
Okay.
you know, information is a problem. Several people have said that tonight, and I would.
And
like to
I'm
enforce that.
acknowledging that we have to do a better job on the how we communicate. I am acknowledging that, and I'm asking that we try to do more through various means other than newspapers. I think that's important in the world that we live in today. Gabrielle, I know your name. We've been in meetings together for about 5 meetings or so far. You know, that's why I know your name. As far as the email, I think it came through today. I intended to get back to you, but sometimes
it was written the other day, but I mean,
yeah, I didn't see it till
today.
today.
But there are other,
yeah.
In general,
Yeah.
I don't want to pick and choose about
Yeah.
little emails and whatnot, but information is a problem.
I agree.
throughout Highland
I
Park.
agree with you.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Nora Krieger. I live at 19 North 6th Avenue. I'm here to support the people who live around the Buckswood area. And I wanted to say that having grown up in New York and lived here for a very long time now, that it is a pleasure to be able to come and talk like this. But Harold Sakowitz brought up the idea of sitting down and discussing all the issues. And as long as the town is a defendant in the lawsuit that's coming up at the end of July, I don't think that's a good thing to do.
That's why I asked our attorney to come.
And I would suggest that you become a plaintiff with the community, with the members who are here, especially with the Marsha and her husband who have been putting out money for lawyers and people to test the soil and so forth. Then we can all sit down and work together and maybe get something done. Thank you.
Robin Lowenstein, still 116 South 4th Avenue. Just wanted to address the response times. I did spend an enormous amount of time going through in the most detailed way I could, based on our statistics and the statistics that were provided to us through the Open Records Act. We did point out to the mayor and council that their response times included all of our calls. That includes what we call emotionally disturbed person and alcohol-related incidents, which are a very large number of our calls. Those types of calls are not responded to with lights and sirens. Going with lights and sirens is dangerous, and in those situations could be upsetting to the patient. Additionally, it takes time sometimes to get to the patient. That's sometimes a little bit delayed or a lot delayed if the police or the psychiatric services on scene ask us to wait until it's appropriate for us to see the patient. And the mayor acknowledged that this all makes sense, but she said, I can only go by what's in my hand. And what I did not realize, because I hadn't looked at it that carefully yet, was that the town's statistics included not just our answering time, but the answering time of mutual aid, which automatically got set. Anytime there was mutual aid, the automatic response time was set to 21 minutes and 59 seconds for every mutual aid call. And that was included in our statistics. The justification for using that time was the national average, and that's something, by the way, that keeps kind of getting changed. The minimum, the standard, that it's the national average. It's not a cutoff, it's just the national average is 10 minutes and 59 seconds. And you heard Robert Wood refer to that a lot. You know, they have to keep it, they can't have more than 10% of their calls go beyond that or whatever. That's a known national average. And they added to that the 11 minutes, which was an incorrect number. It should have been 7 minutes, that they're calling the procedure till we get mutual aid called. I can't think of many times that I've seen mutual aid take 21 minutes and 59 seconds. I mean, that's 22 minutes to arrive, and I don't think that's normally the case. So that was averaged into our dispatch time as well. So even if you use the town's statistics, which I don't specifically agree with for a variety of reasons, and just simply remove the 21-minute, 59-second response time that was automatically put in for the mutual aid, our response times are always below the national average. Or, no, I said that wrong. Our average response time, not every single call, but our average is always below the national average. So when I scrutinized the numbers, I learned many things about specific calls. So in some cases, there was a random call here or there that took a really excessively long time compared to other calls. And when I went back and looked, it was something along the lines of there were 3 calls that came in at the same time, and this call, by the time it got answered, several minutes had gone by, and the person ended up refusing medical attention anyway, because if it was a very serious call, it would have gone straight to mutual aid, and advanced life support would have been on the way as well. So there are some little glitches. When you really look at the data, you realize some interesting things. But anyhow, when we removed the calls that do not go lights and sirens, and we've been told that they don't really have the means to do that. We don't either. I had to do it by hand. And like I said, it took forever. When you take out the data of the calls that we do not use lights and sirens, our average response time, and we, by the way, were a little bit stricter on ourselves. We didn't call it from when we're dispatched to when we arrive at the location. We went from when we're dispatched to when we arrive at the patient's side, which sometimes can add a couple of minutes to the number. January, our average response time was 5 minutes, 13 seconds. In February, 9 minutes, 53 seconds. In March, 10 minutes, 24 seconds. In April, 9 minutes, 39 seconds. In May, 10 minutes, 43 seconds. And in June, 9 minutes and 43 seconds. So our overall average response time for the first 6 months of 2018 has been 9 minutes and 49 seconds. That's 1 minute and 10 seconds faster than the national average. So just, and Lieutenant Hamill, you and I can certainly sit and go over this forever and ever, but I have it, and this is what we're getting from our statistics. So
I would like to have you and Lieutenant Hamill and sit down and go through all of this, if that's okay with you, Chief, because I want to make sure we're looking at apples and apples.
What would be the point? You've already made the decision.
I would like to compare apples and apples, okay? So
I think part of the problem, honestly, Mayor, and we've heard this from a lot of different people, and I'm not sitting up there, so I don't have to be quite as politically correct as everybody else. People are saying they're frustrated. And the biggest frustration I heard tonight was lack of communication, and I heard some underlying rumblings, and I think the squad certainly feels it, of the council not listening at all to their constituents. This is the 3rd meeting. I've heard little to no, support for bringing in Robert Wood. I've heard a ton of support for keeping things the way that they were, and if it needs to be tweaked, it needs to be tweaked. But this was a very, very drastic move, and there's things that are not being made clear. It must be clear. There is currently no contract. Anything that you're talking about with regard to billing right now is off the table. Robert Wood, at this moment, for the past month plus, has been allowed and will continue to be allowed to bill however they want. And I know that you're saying you're going to be sensitive to it, but that doesn't really tell anybody that they're not going to get a bill, right? It's very nice. Councilwoman made a beautiful speech about how well we've all worked together for years and years and years. Let's be honest, that's not true. Every year, for years and years and years, long before this administration, right? So it's not personal against anybody here. For years, we've been fighting for more money. When new developments, and they're all over the place now, but when new developments started coming up, we pointed out to previous mayors that it is very customary for developers to be kind of told by the town, hey, we expect something for our emergency services because you're increasing the population. That has never happened. When you and I discussed it and we said, what about all the revenue that you very happily announced, this was a year or two ago, you know, that you're going to be getting because of all these new residences, you said, well, we have services that we have to increase as well. And we said, like, we're part of those services. It costs us more as well. I mean, it's been always an ongoing battle. We've told you in private that we're the most disrespected organization in this town, right? And I know everybody has their priority, and everybody has their area that people should think you should spend money on or effort on or whatever. And maybe, you know, I don't know, pick a category. You know, trees, library, all the volunteers, all the great things that go on. And it's a beautiful town with a lot of great things. And maybe some people think that those things should be not paid for and first aid should be paid for. I can't speak for anybody's personal opinion, but we've talked about this, right? We just had somebody, Ms. Welkowitz said we had this beautiful volunteer appreciation thing, that the squad, of all things, the squad, oops, that wouldn't be a volunteer organization on our minds, was totally forgotten about. We were told the day of. I mean, we are so disrespected. It's not true that we've had a beautiful ongoing relationship. Let's be honest with the people. I'm not being disrespectful. I hope I'm not. I'm just saying this is honest. I don't have to put on the happy face and be all politically correct. I'm being straight up. A year ago, we came to you and we went out dancing and doing cartwheels because for the first time in 25 years, you said, we are going to up your monetary stipend that we give you. And we were so excited. The stipulation was that you wanted us to bill our residents, or our residents' insurance. And the way that money would be handled is whatever came in from billing the residents was going to be split between the first aid squad for their budget and the town for their budget, which is, in my opinion, absurd. And ever since then, now everything's gone even more downhill. I mean, I believe that Matt Hirsch wrote in his little goodbye blurb something along the lines of the squad refusing to bill. And as long as we can hold out, look, God forbid, someday we may need to, but as long as we can hold out, we're going to hold out. But we are never going to make money for the town. That's absurd. So the residents need to know the truth. We don't have this wonderful lovey-dovey. We try to have a respectful relationship. We try to work together. But the reality is, a lot of what is being presented is just flat out dishonest.
Okay,
that's the truth.
So Robin, if you listen to Elsie's whole thing, she did say that there has been a lack of cooperation between the two organizations. She did not paint that everything is lovey-dovey, because we all know it's not.
Thank you.
And so you know, I want to state that. And when you say the town's money is the people's money. It's not. It doesn't. The town's money doesn't go in a jar.
No, I wasn't suggesting it went in anybody's pocketbook, please, for sure. What I mean is it's inappropriate to raise funds for the benefit of the town.
Or the residents. It's for the
residents. It's inappropriate.
It helps
okay,
taxes.
It's inappropriate to raise money for the residents from the work of the first aid squad. That's inappropriate. And ever since we said no to that, it's been downhill.
Well, and also, Robin, you were asked to come in and explain some things to us, and I know you said you never got the message, but nobody ever showed up or even called us.
Okay, if you're referring to EMS charts, and I believe that's what you're referring to, we told you very clearly when you came down to our meeting that that's the program we'd be using. There's nothing really to explain. It's the program. That's like half the squads in the state use that. The other half use Image Trends, more or less. There's a couple of other ones, but those are the two big ones. That's what we use for data collection. It's not something that anybody can piggyback off of. It's not. It's just what we use.
Out of respect for the request, somebody could have explained what the new responsibilities are.
And I apologize. That was under a previous administration. I can't really speak to it. And I told you that in private as well, that I couldn't speak to that because the person who you specifically said they'd come, wouldn't come, whatever, was a previous administration, and they're no longer with us. So I can't speak to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just saying,
Okay,
let's just be honest, right? The honest truth is,
right.
It's not always so wonderful, and we
Right.
don't feel like you're listening to your constituents.
So I understand that you have, I'm not going to be there because I'm going to be at another meeting, but there's a meeting for the First Aid Squad with the Public Safety Committee on Thursday?
Yes, there is at 7 p.m.
So, you know, I'm sure you'll have a chance to go over.
Yes, and if we do everything that's asked of us, like good little boys and girls, then we will be maybe considered to have the privilege of answering during the day on the weekends. That's what we're talking about.
Okay.
People are not going to get a free ambulance service during the week. Be honest with them. And tell them it's a done deal. Tell them the way it was told to us. Not up for negotiation, done deal. I know you weren't in the room, but anybody in the room can tell you. Quote, not up for negotiation, done deal. Tell your constituents the truth. Because they're here every month yelling and screaming about it. Just tell them the truth. Don't waste your time. We have no intention of listening to you.
You have no intention?
No. Tell them the truth, that you have no intention of listening to them.
Oh, that's absolutely not true. And anybody who has come to speak with me knows that.
Why are you dealing with a contract with our instead of sitting down with us?
They're sitting down with
No,
you
they're
on
not. That's not
Thursday.
sitting down. They're not sitting down to
Okay.
have a grown-up
Okay.
conversation. They're sitting
Okay.
down to see if we'll meet their demands.
Okay, look, step number one.
What kind of kickback are you getting from
Okay.
Borough? That's the question.
Mayor, somebody asked me before they left the room, I don't know of any, but if there is, maybe let me know. Before somebody left the room, they asked me to please ask if there was going to be any other open public meetings about the issue of first aid. I don't know if they specifically meant Robert Wood Johnson or if they just meant in general, but that was the question.
Okay, so let's keep this, one person talking at a time. Let's see what happens after you guys meet on Thursday night, and then we can talk about what our next steps are going to be.
Okay, I just want to ask you a question, and you don't have to answer what it is. Just a yes or no would be great. Are you personally aware of the very specific agenda of that meeting? Has that been shared with you?
Yes.
Okay. And are we going to get an answer about whether it's 2018 or 2019 that we're going to stop seeing donation from the town? Because we've had some confusing answers about that.
Yeah, I'll talk with the councilwoman and the borough administrator.
When do you think we'll have an answer on that?
Sorry?
When do you think we'll have an answer on that?
We should have an answer after our meeting.
Okay, that's fine. No, after tonight's meeting, you mean, or after our Thursday night meeting?
I hate to interrupt, but this has been one of the problems where there's no respect and there's no professionalism when we get together. And we've
Agreed,
asked
in both
over
directions.
and over, and I said that earlier, and I've asked over and over, let's have some accountability. Let's talk about professionalism, have some reliability, and let's have one person that we have within your structure that reports, so there's nothing that says, oh, this person does this and they're not there, so we don't know. Let's have a single point of reporting, so we can get information.
Are you suggesting that if somebody leaves the squad, we should be responsible for speaking on their behalf? That's what happens.
If you work in a corporate America structure and there's a CEO, everyone knows at some point, you don't have to go into the weeds of everything, but you have a general idea of what's going on within your organization. So should someone leave for whatever the reason, you would still have a general idea of what's going on, and you can report back.
By
to say,
general
this is
idea,
what
you mean that there was a meeting she was supposed to attend? Is that what you mean by general idea? No, because that's what we're talking about.
Right, all right. All right, so let's.
I'm also waiting to find out the two questions.
Thing, and it's not just
Could
one
we
thing.
speak one at a time? That we've been doing this for 35 minutes now.
I'm still waiting to ask and hear the answer to the question about. I saw in the video just yesterday that there was a request for the breakdown. The residents wanted a breakdown of exactly what, you said that there's insurance, there's gas, whatever, and they wanted to know exactly what the costs were, and the answer they got was, I'm not going to say an answer because I'm going to be held to it, but we will have all those statistics on a spreadsheet or something of that nature to share with you at the Borough Council meeting on the 10th. So I'm wondering if that has happened.
We don't know. That has not happened.
Okay.
And it does take time to gather all that information. We're working on gathering the data and to present to you.
I didn't say the 10th. You did. That's why I was asking. It's fine.
We were hoping that we would have made the deadline of the 10th, just like we were hoping that we would have met with you guys yesterday, but that did not happen either.
Because you gave us one day during work hours. You said this is the only day. Let's not put stuff out there if you're not going to be clear about it.
Robin.
That was unfair.
I did not say.
Okay, Robin, how about the two?
I'll show you the email from Chief Frisco. Chief, you said Monday, right? Are we available Monday before 4? And that was the only option, because nothing else worked for the people involved, except for
Okay.
Monday before 4.
Robin,
and we work.
Robin, let's take this afterwards or separately
I didn't
or on
start it.
Thursday.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, so does somebody want to help and get her the microphone, please? Thank you.
I'm scared to death.
What?
I said, I'm scared to death. I was talking to two of the spokesmen on at the last meeting for RWJ, and I said to them towards the end of the meeting, you know, I fall a lot, unfortunately. Would you come and pick me up? And they said to me this, and I can almost quote them. If we come and pick you up and you stay home, no charge. But if we take you to the hospital, you will pay $1,000.
Okay. Okay. Is there anybody who hasn't spoke? Okay. May I have a motion to adjourn to the conference meeting?
So moved.
Anybody? Meeting is adjourned.